The sea is flat and grey. The December wind smells of iron and wet stone. A small supply ship fights at the edge of the chart, and there is no light. This is Still Unanswered. I'm Eleanor Marsh. Tonight, 3 men, 1 lighthouse, and a silence that won't explain itself. 3 men vanish into the wind. Picture it. Late December, 1900. The supply vessel Hesperus pushes toward the Flannan Isles, tiny rocks far out in the North Atlantic, west of the Outer Hebrides. The crew expect the lighthouse beam to cut through the grey, to know the world is as it was. But it is not. There is no beam, no flag, no smoke, just the hush of waves. The relief keeper stands on deck, scanning the tower windows with a spyglass. He calls up the mast with the ship's horn again and again. No answer. So they go ashore. What they find is ordinary and terrible. A lamp polished and unlit, a chair toppled, oilskins unaccountably left behind, small, precise details that point away from the extraordinary, and yet the men are nowhere. How do 3 experienced lighthouse keepers simply vanish from a rock in the middle of a hostile sea, with no bodies and no clear explanation? That's what we're going to walk through tonight. We'll read the records, we'll walk the island, we'll weigh the weather, and we'll test the theories, from the practical to the improbable. But we won't pretend to solve what has, for more than a century, resisted solution. If you're driving, please park first. If you're at home, pour something warm. There are places in this story that will want you to imagine sound. Wind, surf, a bell gone mute. Stay with me. Welcome to Still Unanswered. I'm Eleanor Marsh. I used to work with lighthouse trusts and coastal archives, so I tend to go to the original sources, the logbooks, the superintendent's reports, the maps that smell faintly of salt. Joining me tonight is someone who knows these seas as both a scholar and a practical man. Callum, welcome.
Thank you, Ellie. Pleasure to be here. It's a strange comfort to be talking about a place I have stood on. The Flannan Isles, Eilean Mòr in Gaelic. It's a hard, uncompromising bit of land. You feel small there. You feel the ocean's patience.
We'll come back to what it's like underfoot. First, for listeners who haven't held the map, where are these isles exactly?
The Flannans sit roughly 32 miles west of the Isle of Lewis. 3 small islands. Eilean Mòr is the large one, the one with the lighthouse, and then the others are little rocky teeth. It's exposed to the Atlantic swell. Storms funnel down from Labrador and Iceland and slam into them. In winter, the sea here is capable of producing waves that are extraordinary. Extraordinary in the literal sense.
Extraordinary. Good word. Now, set the date for us.
December 1900. The supply ship Hesperus is due to relieve the keepers around the 20th, but storms delay her. The lighthouse should be visible to ships, warning them away from the rock. It is a beacon of human order in a very disorderly ocean.
And the men, 3 human beings who did this work for a living. James Ducat, the principal keeper, steady and respected. Thomas Marshall, the second assistant, younger and conscientious. Donald MacArthur, the occasional keeper, older, tough, a man with a short temper, according to some notes, but dependable. We'll speak of them as people, because in the end, the record is 3 names and the smallest traces of their last routines: a polished lamp, a half-eaten meal, a chair knocked over. On that rock, the difference between routine and catastrophe is thin. All right, Callum, tell me about their routines. What did lighthouse keeping look like in 1900?
The job involved strict schedules: trimming the lamps, winding the clockwork, cleaning the lens, keeping logs, and lots of maintenance: ropes, chains, moorings, securing crates. They had signal flags and a fog bell. But importantly, there were rules born from hard experience. 1 keeper would remain inside during dangerous landings. 2 would go outside. That rule existed because the tower needed someone to keep the light in case of a mishap.
Rules to survive.
Exactly. But rules are only as good as the people and the moment. Weather makes fools of schedules.
Let's walk through the days that led up to the mystery. We'll keep it chronological because the timeline is one of the places the story frays. The Hesperus was delayed by bad weather. There are notes of severe storms between December 12th and 15th. Ships passing on the 15th and later reported the light was not visible. Then more days of silence. Somewhere in that gap, between a light once seen and a tower later found empty, the 3 men disappeared. Callum, a lot of the stories that circulate hinge on logbook entries, some of which are disputed. Briefly, what survives and what might have been added later?
The official logbooks exist, but they've been subject to embellishment and retellings. Some dramatic entries, the ones that describe emotional breakdowns or prayers, are likely later additions made for sensational effect. The original, authoritative sources are more functional: weather notes, times, tasks. The superintendent's reports are also crucial. The caution we must have is not to treat every dramatic line we read in a 20th century retelling as documentary evidence.
Right. Feelings get written into facts over decades, but the facts that matter are there. Storms, a missing light, a delayed relief boat. Then, the relief, Joseph Mòr, finally lands. And that day is the cold open, the ordinary details that are also terrifying. Mòr comes ashore. He expects the lamp to be burning, the men to be at their posts. He finds the main door unlocked. Inside, the lamp is cleaned, polished, ready to be lit, but dark. On the kitchen table, plates washed, a single half-eaten sandwich, a clock that has stopped. In the gear room, a pair of oilskins hangs where you'd expect, but another set is missing. A chair is toppled as if someone rose from it in a hurry. No bodies, no struggle. The west landing, where men go to secure gear after storms, is battered, iron railings twisted, turf ripped away, a bracket for a lifebuoy torn off. Everything suggests a violent sea, yet the people are gone. Why would they be at the West Landing at all in such weather?
Because equipment needed securing. Moorings can snap, crates can wash out to sea. The integrity of the landing has to be maintained. They are keepers of the place. In a storm, men will go out to prevent greater loss, even at risk to themselves. That's the hard reality.
And that hard reality is the basis for what many call the obvious explanation. 2 men went out to secure gear, a third joined them, and a freak wave, A rogue wave swept them into the sea. It is plausible, Callum. The evidence of storm damage at West Landing supports it. But plausibility is not proof.
Right. The Northern Lighthouse Board Superintendent, Robert Muirhead, investigated. He interviewed the relief crew, he examined the logbooks and the landing. His conclusion leans toward that scenario: a storm, a breach of protocol, and a fatal wave. He lays it out carefully. Yet his report leaves loose threads, small anomalies that nag at the conclusion.
Let's go through those threads. First, the oilskins. One set missing, one left behind. If they were heading out together, you'd expect them to be dressed for it. Why would one man go without his coat?
There's a human explanation: haste and necessity. If someone runs out to help in an emergency, they may leave something behind. It happens. But the counterpoint is important. Why all three? If one left alone, then a second and third left to help. That can make sense. But it also leaves us with little evidence of any intervention. No tools broken in an altercation, no blood, no footprints beyond the normal. The sea wipes things clean.
The sea is patient.
And thorough.
Another puzzle. The lamp. It was polished, ready for lighting. Doesn't that suggest they were carrying on with their duties inside rather than thrown into panic?
Yes. A polished lamp suggests that routine work had been done. They were maintaining the light before the relief arrived, perhaps that morning or the night before. That detail pushes against a theory of sudden chaotic departure from inside the tower. Instead, it suggests the men left the lighthouse with purpose: to check something, to secure a mooring, to assess damage.
So imagine this: a lamp trimmed, a clock wound, small constancies of human order, then out into the elemental noise to do the practical tasks that keep ships alive. The record supports that image, but the record doesn't tell us what exact second the sea decided to take them. We should pause and acknowledge the human side. These three were not nameless bodies of a sensational headline. They were people with histories. James Ducat had served elsewhere. He was well regarded. Thomas Marshall was younger. Colleagues called him careful. Donald MacArthur had weathered storms. Those are the men the relief crew expected to find. They were, by all accounts, professionals.
So, when we speak of them taking risks, it's not that they were negligent. It's that the job demanded a certain exposure to danger. In the past, I have walked paths on islands where keepers perform tasks that look routine but are inherently dangerous. You're standing inches from a precipice, tying a rope, and a wave higher than you've seen before comes over the lip of the rock. That changes everything in a blink.
Blink. That's how short the moment can be. But, Callum, let's be rigorous. The official investigation, Muirhead's report, is the nearest thing to an answer. Tell us how he got to his conclusion and what he couldn't explain.
Muirhead interviewed Joseph Moore and the Hesperus crew. He inspected the island, noted the damage at West Landing, and considered the behaviours recorded in logs. He proposed that 2 keepers went to secure equipment at West Landing. A third keeper breached the rule and joined them. A freak, unusually large wave, perhaps part of a series, swept them off the rocks. He considered and dismissed foul play as unlikely. His report reads like the work of a man who wants to reconcile facts with human fallibility. But Muirhead had no eyewitnesses to the actual event and no bodies recovered. His theory fits the evidence, mostly, but cannot be confirmed.
Fit, not proof. I want to take a breath here and go through some other theories that have clung to this case. People have told ghost stories about the Flannan keepers for a century. Let's talk about those, but clearly mark them as what they are: folklore, cultural reactions, not documentary history. Callum, got any favourite local whispers?
Oh, there are many. One tells of a monstrous wave that reached up and took the keepers as though the sea had hands. Another says islanders later saw ghostly figures on the rocks or in the tower windows on stormy nights. Poets and storytellers loved those images, the lonely tower, the absent keepers, because it's a splendid canvas for metaphor.
A splendid canvas for metaphor, yes, and dangerous when we treat metaphor as evidence. There are also more sensational claims, that a sea creature grabbed them, or that the three stepped into some shared madness and walked into the sea together. These make for good stories. They are satisfying in a certain way, but they collapse under scrutiny. There was no sign of mass suicide in the records. There was no prior evidence of shared hysteria. The emotional log entries that might support such a reading appear to be embellishments added later, not original entries.
Historians must separate what resonates emotionally from what is documented. The sea inspires myth because it is incomprehensible in its power. But for a practical reconstruction, we must test things against the island's geography and the physical evidence. And that brings us back to the more prosaic theories: rogue wave, accident, perhaps a chain reaction of rescue attempts.
All right, let's set out the main non-supernatural theories, one by one, and test them against the facts. First, the rogue wave theory, which we've already touched on. Story form: a savage storm. Two men go to secure a gangway or gear at West Landing. The sea is throwing itself at the rock. A third man defies procedure to help. A wave, larger than anyone on the island has seen, sweeps the men off. The broken railings and the torn lifebuoy bracket suggest such a violent event.
Support for the rogue wave theory includes documented storm damage on the island, the known capacity of the North Atlantic to throw up very large waves, the keeper's duty to secure tools and moorings. It fits human behaviour. People expose themselves because they see the potential for greater loss.
Against it, the oilskins anomaly and the absence of any direct physical remains. A wave big enough to totally clear the landing and take 3 men might also have left additional traces, though the ocean is not honest in leaving evidence.
The ocean is selective. It takes some things and leaves others. Large waves can sweep men and small objects into the deep and leave heavy fixtures mangled on the rock. So I don't dismiss the rogue wave theory on the basis of missing bodies. The sea doesn't always produce a corpse. But the oilskins question still nags. Why would one man go out without them? And why would all 3 be in the same vulnerable place at once?
Next theory: accident and chain reaction. One keeper goes out and is swept away or injured. A second tries to rescue him and is swept too. The third cannot watch his colleagues die and rushes out, only to be taken as well. It's a tragic domino of human response.
It's plausible because it's consistent with human instinct. We don't behave like rule-following machines when a colleague is in danger. And it explains why the protocol, one man inside, might be broken. The key weakness is, again, the lack of physical evidence that a rescue attempt occurred. No dragged rope, no torn clothing caught on the rocks. But the sea could have carried away such traces.
Third, foul play.
People sometimes suggest violence, or a visiting ship's crew, or even an internal argument that turned dangerous. Practically speaking, the Flannans are remote. There were no signs of forced entry or a fight in the tower. No logs indicate visitors. Muirhead and other investigators didn't find any plausible cause for violent crime. So, while not impossible, it is the least supported explanation.
Fourth, psychological breakdown, or pact, the idea that isolation pushed them into something collectively irrational.
This is attractive to storytellers because it gives a motive. But it relies on emotional evidence that isn't in the reliable records. There are no contemporary notes showing the men were unstable. The dramatic entries about breakdowns appear later. It's an idea built more from narrative need than from archival truth.
So, what do we do with this? We have plausible natural explanations that fit most of the evidence that leave gaps. And we have other ideas that are more speculative.
We test ideas against geography, weather, and human behaviour. And when theories don't fully account for anomalies, like the oilskins and the lack of remains, we admit the limits. That humility is important.
I'm going to take the listeners on a walk now, in your head, with me, across the stone from the tower door down to West Landing. Callum, help me out. What is that walk like?
From the tower, you step onto compacted turf and broken basalt. The path down is close to a precipice in places. Iron railings were installed to give some safety, but the wind takes your balance. The landing itself is a flat-topped boulder with cleats and rings where ropes attach. It's only separated from open ocean by a metre or two in places when the sea is calm. In a gale, it can be a perilous, slippery place.
Imagine lashing crates to a ring. The rope vibrates with the ocean. You look out, and the swell is a living wall. You hear it more than you see it. The spray is in your face. Each step is chosen. Now, imagine someone calls from below, "Hold that," and another man turns too quickly on wet rock. You can picture how a rescue attempt or a misstep could escalate in 3 heartbeats.
Exactly. It's not heroic myth. It's functional risk. Men who have worked these places know they must be cautious. But when they see an immediate threat to equipment that could endanger future ships, they will act.
The geography helps us accept the rogue wave or chain reaction rescue as credible. It doesn't eliminate the mysteries, but it gives us a plausible human story. Men doing their job, a sudden, terrible reversal. I want to bring us back to the official voice in the matter, Robert Muirhead, and read in his approach a certain procedural solemnity. He did what an investigator should. He did not fill silence with myths. He offered a sober conclusion that still left open the gaps.
He did. And his report has guided most historians to accept the wave/rescue scenario as the likeliest. But we must remember, likeliest is not certain. There is always a residue, the small pointed work of asking why of each anomaly until you soften the urge for finality.
That residue is where human imagination goes to work. The Flannan Isles have become a cultural mirror. Poets and songwriters have used the image of the empty tower to explore loneliness, fate, and the unknowable. Those are fine uses of the story, but as historians and as listeners, we must separate the mirror from what the mirror reflects. Why does this case stick with us? Why are we still talking about it more than a century later?
Because it combines a handful of powerful elements: extreme environment, ordinary routines, and the sudden absence of closure. We don't like loose ends. The sea both gives us evidence and withholds it. The setting, a small rock in an infinite ocean, emphasizes human vulnerability. And the lack of a definitive answer invites stories to fill the silence.
It also taps into a deeper discomfort, the idea that professional expertise and routine maintenance might still be undone by random nature. We like to believe competence is a shield. The Flannans show it's only a partial one. Before we close, Callum, let's give our listeners something practical. What are the most likely answers we can honestly give, and what should we leave open?
Most likely, a storm and one of the natural scenarios, either a rogue wave while securing equipment, or an accident, followed by a rescue attempt that failed. These fit the geography, the damage observed, and human behaviour. What we should leave open: the exact sequence, the question of whether one man went out alone first, and why the oilskins detail is unresolved. No physical evidence allows us to be categorical.
So we end with an honest balance. The practical explanation is probable. Certainty is impossible. Imagine standing on the same stone they stood on. Feel the wind push at your collar. You can measure the cliffs. You can read the logs. You can even reconstruct the most plausible last moments. But the final, lived instant, the moment the sea took its decision, is held by the ocean. We will never know whether the men tussled with a rope, shouted at each other in the spray, or slipped as the wave came. We will never be certain if a single freak surge did it, or a chain of response. For now, and perhaps forever, it's still unanswered. James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, Donald MacArthur. 3 names knocked into silence by a sea that will keep its secrets. We have tried to be faithful to the record tonight. We've tested stories against geography and archives, and we've listened to the waves, to the logbooks, to the human urge to explain. Callum, final thought?
Respect the sea. Respect the keepers. The records teach us about courage and duty, and the limits of both. Sometimes the most honest conclusion is to accept uncertainty and keep asking better questions. Sometimes the most honest conclusion is to accept uncertainty and keep asking better questions.
Thank you, Callum. If you've enjoyed this episode, follow Still Unanswered on your podcast app. You can also find photos and transcriptions of the island and the superintendent's report on our website. Next time, another case where the evidence leads us up to an edge and then stops. We can stand on the same stone they stood on. We can measure the cliffs and read the logs. But the moment they vanished belongs to the sea. And for now, it's still unanswered. I'm Eilean Mòr. Good night.